welcome! For those of you who do not know me, I'm Tanishkia and I am just a girl who's trying to be helpful and share some helpful insights regarding academics, my own experience with my faith, and also here and there a bit of lifestyle. Nonetheless, I'm here today for an academic video. So, NBTs. What are NBTs? So, first and foremost, I'm getting all of my information or let me say most of my information is coming from the NBT website. So that's nbt.ac.za. I'll link it in the description box below. I will urge you to also do your own research. I'm not possibly going to be able to cover everything that you need to know about NBTs. This is just me bringing the important key details to you in a short video. So NBTs are focused on testing your readiness. And I say readiness because it depends, but basically they're there to test how ready you are for university or tertiary education studies, okay? And so it's basically these tests that you have to do in order to indicate to the university whether you're actually ready to do an undergraduate degree or any other degree, and whether you will be needing support or not. And so NBTs are important for universities, and some universities that definitely will look at your NBT results in South Africa specifically are UCT, Stellenbosch, the University of Pretoria, we have UFS, University of Free State, and many others will look at your NBT results because it gives them a good indication of how ready and prepared you are for university. As we all know, university is a big jump from high school, so I think it's always good for a university to make sure that you are going to be prepared, and should you not be prepared, then they can make alternative arrangements to get you prepared. And that would usually be in the form of allocating you to a bridging course before you start with your actual degree. But yeah, bridging courses, just to quickly clarify, bridging courses are basically, from what I know, haven't done research on this specifically, but from what I know, bridging courses are where you basically an extra year's added to your degree so that you first learn the basics in that first year. So I think you'll learn things like writing, other skills, maybe some literacy skills as well, that they may feel that you are not adequate enough in yet. So you'll learn all of the basics that you need to learn. I think it also depends on the type of degree and faculty that you're going into. You will be taught those basics, and then after you complete that year, then you'll start with your official studies of your undergraduate degree. Okay, that's a mouthful. Okay, so that's what NBTs are, just a formal definition that the website gives. It is the focus on academic readiness for university study. I said that. Each test requires you to apply prior learning, so things that you've learned in the past from school, high school specifically, and even back to primary school. And you need to be able to use all of these resources and materials and knowledge that you've learned. Each test requires you to apply prior learning, what you know, and it gives them a good indication of what you are able to do as well, to the materials that reflect expectations for first year students in university programs. NBTs basically consist of like two components. So the first one, or test rather, is your academic and quantitative literacy tests, and then the second one is your math or mathematics test. This one, however, is only if you're going into a mathematical or science-based field of studies. If you're not doing anything related to math or science, you do not have to write your math a NBT test. It's not necessary. You don't have to do it. AQL would be sufficient if you're going a non-maths path. Yeah. So to basically give you a bit of a summary of what exactly each of these entails and what the NBT tests related to AQL and the math expect of you is the following. so I'm just reading from my phone. It allows you to be able to make meaning from academic text, understand vocabulary, and then be able to relate that to your academic studies, evaluate evidence used to support claims made by writers. You need to be able to extrapolate and draw conclusions and inferences from text. So this is really very much similar to in English. Home language for me, I think it was quite similar, because you basically had a text given to you and you had to answer contextual text-based questions on the text given, and it just tests a range of things with regards to how you interpret text in your writing or thinking in terms of literary terms. And they could also test a lot of other things like a bit of language, spelling, grammatical conventions, etc. Yeah. And then you need to be able to identify text differences as related to the writer's purposes, audiences, and forms of communication. And you also need to know how to use syntax and punctuation used to express meaning. You also need to be able to understand basic numerical concepts that are being used in a text. This is for the academic literacy side, okay? So remember AQL, academic and quantitative literacy. So the quantitative part is more numerical. For the quantitative literacy side, they need you to be able to apply quantitative procedures and reasoning in symbolic and non-symbolic situations. And then you also need to be able to apply information from a variety of tables, graphs, charts, and text, etc., and integrate information obtained from multiple sources. You need to be able to perform multiple step calculations using information presented with text, symbols, and with graphs. You need to be able to identify trends and patterns. You also then need to be able to apply properties of simple geometric shapes and be able to determine measurements. You also need to be able to interpret quantitative information presented verbally, symbolically, and graphically. That's a whole mouthful. And in summary, I will say what the quantitative part of the NBTs consists of is kind of similar. It gave me a similar, I didn't do mathematical literacy, but it gave me, from what I've heard from my friends and other people who did it, it really felt like a mathematical literacy kind of type of paper. There was some measurement and distance related questions in there, really basic things, but really tests your understanding on these basic quantitative related concepts. And so that is what the AQL is part of. And then obviously with the mathematics, the MAT NBT test, it requires you to be able to understand and apply properties of the real number system, including surds and exponents, recognize and use patterns, including sequences and series. You need to be able to apply relationships such as ratios and percentages in a variety of contexts. Yeah, apply the results of algebraic manipulations with equations and with inequalities. You also need to understand the function concept and identify properties of functions, you know, like your parabola, hyperbola, those types of functions. And then also you need to be able to interpret transformations and be able to represent them algebraic, why can't I speak? You need to be able to interpret transformations of functions represented algebraically and graphically. And then you also need to be able to identify relationships between graphs and the equations or inequalities and the regions that they describe. And then also you need to be able to, I think this is definitely going to be tested and is typical, you need to be able to apply trigonometric, so trigonometry. Make sure you know your trigonometry, okay? I'll give some tips later. But yeah, you need to be able to apply trigonometric identities and concepts in solving problems. You also then need to be able to understand properties and be able to interpret them and interpret representations of two-dimensional and three-dimensional shapes. And then you also need to be able to apply principles of analytical geometry. So, you know, your coordinates, on the Cartesian plane, and like, you know, finding distances, etc. And then also being able to interpret various representations and measures of data. And Lastly, you need to be able to use logical skills in making deductions and determining the validity of given assertions. That's a whole mouthful. And so all that I've just mentioned for the math part are basically concepts that, if you do mathematics if you're grade 12, in grade 12 or 11, you would have done most of these things like trigonometry, analytical geometry, functions, number series, things like that. Like those are things that they want to make sure that you're solid on. So having said that, make sure that you are well prepared, and I will get to that later in the video where I share a bit of my tips and a really cool resource to help you prepare for NBTs. But that's what is expected of you, and so that is why they have these tests called NBT tests. For those of you who are not aware, so this is a requirement if you want to study further, as in go to university or be at a tertiary institution. You're going to have to write this test, especially if you want to get into the really rather well-known universities such as UCT, Stellenbosch University, which is where I'm at now, Wits, the University of Witwatersrand, and many others. If you want to really get into them, you're gonna have to write this because they do look at your NBT results. So additionally, I will add this. So NBTs, obviously, they're not necessarily, yes, universities they do look at your grade 12 NSC final results. Those are important. NBTs are not as important, I'd say, as your grade 12 results. However, they are important because they really do and can really help you in conjunction with your grade 12 results. So what I mean by this is sometimes it's possible that if you, for example, let's say that you don't necessarily do as well as you expected in your final NSC results. However, if your NBT results are looking pretty good and you got proficient marks, then it really does give you a better chance of being able to get accepted into a specific tertiary institution, because your NBT results, should anything not go the way you want in grade 12, you could still stand a very good chance of still being accepted, because your NBT results reflect that you actually are capable as well. However, I'm not saying that they don't consider your grade 12 results. They do. They are important, so work hard in this year if you are in matric. And I would say just make sure that you do as well as you can in matric, regardless of how your NBT results look. Don't rely on your NBT solely, but I'm saying don't neglect your NBT results as well, So that's what I wanted to mention. Okay. Hey you, so this is the end of part 1. Part 2 will be uploaded separately, and this is just where I give you guys some extra tips and advice from my side. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like, subscribe, and comment for more university and academic related content. Have an amazing day. Bye.